off Imperial Exit in Waco, joined by Grayson Grundhoefer. Grayson, thanks for your patience. And tomorrow's a day. Do you expect maybe like almost at least somewhat full throttle, or is this going to be a glorified scrimmage?
I mean, most years it's kind of more leaning towards the glorified scrimmage, I would say. And so I don't expect this year to be much different than that. Now, I do think that we've also seen over the past few years with Dave Aranda and the staff that they are focusing on a lot of things with this game. And so I think you'll see a lot of different looks on the offensive side and defensive side as they kind of try to put guys in positions to make plays and figure out, kind of what the roster is looking like, to be honest, and figure out, where guys fit in, what guys can do. So I do think you'll kind of see a mixture, but in general, obviously the main goal here is that nobody gets hurt and that you get to evaluate your roster. So that all oftentimes leans towards being a scrimmage as opposed to something full throttle where you're, really trying to hit people and really trying to show off the physicality part of things. I don't think it's going to lean too far on that side.
Grayson, obviously one, portal edition in the bag right now, but what do you expect to happen here in the next week or so? And is secondary maybe the chief concern that they really have to get something done there?
So there's two positions that they're really focusing on. So obviously, there were three, but Byron Bonds committed yesterday. So he's going to fill into that jack position, which was a position they really needed to address. They only have one veteran guy there, which is Garmin Randolph, and he hasn't been participating in spring football. So other than that, it's a bunch of young guys or unproven commodities. And so trying to figure that out, I think led them to taking Byron Bonds with one of those scholarship spots. Now, as far as the other two spots, I would say cornerback is probably the utmost concern. There's a couple guys they're looking at for that position in the transfer portal, including a Johnny Carter, another Utah State guy, which is where Byron Bonds is from. And Johnny is supposed to visit this weekend, and who knows, maybe he'll make a decision this weekend as well. And he would fill into that cornerback role. As far as the other position, they're looking at the defensive line. There's a couple guys that they're looking at there up front. They want to find another guy that's kind of in that TJ Franklin, Gabe Hall role. So something like, 6'5", 6'6", 290, who can be a versatile defensive lineman and can come in and really add depth. Probably not start, but be more of a depth option. And as we know with Baylor on the defensive line, they've been rotating guys in and out over the last few years under Dave Aranda. So it's important for them to have quite a bit of depth there. So, again, I would say jack and cornerback were the top concerns. Defensive line and safety or another cornerback are probably the next concerns on the radar if they're able to open up some more roster spots if guys decide to move on from Baylor after the spring.
Grayson, I know this isn't going to be like the 50,000 people in attendance and how other people gussy up their spring games, but what are your expectations or what is their focus as far as guys who will be visiting or checking out Baylor? Is there much attention being placed on that, and if so, what extent?
Right, so there is attention being placed on it. There's going to be a lot of visitors there this weekend, quite a few 2024 guys. You'll have some 2025 prospects as well. And, of course, some transfers and maybe even some younger guys like 2026 or 2027. So they're definitely making a focus on that. There are some guys that are there today, actually, and then they'll be there for the spring game tomorrow. So quite a bit of visitors. I think it's going to be one of those things where it's a mixture, right? Because, the crowd's not going to be crazy. It's not going to be full by any means, but recruits also want to see what the product looks like on the field. And they want to see what their position's going to look like, what the offense looks like, or what the defense looks like. So it's still very important and something that Baylor can absolutely sell to recruits. So, it will absolutely be a focus this weekend.
So who would be the largest or possibly the name that enters the transfer portal after this is over, with it open until April 30th? There's someone out there on the Baylor roster that you're kind of leaning towards leaving?
I'm really, I try not to speculate on those things just because I don't like to speculate on specific names. But I will tell you, it does seem like the way that Baylor has gone out and sent out offers and evaluated transfer portal prospects, despite not really having much room, is a little not necessarily surprising, but I think it's a little telling that there might be a couple guys that decide to leave. I don't think you're going to see a mass exodus like what has happened at TCU and Texas A&M. I don't think it's going to be like that, but you might see a couple guys here and there, and really most of the time those things are pretty obvious, right? It's guys who are either older and not playing or younger guys who felt like they should be playing already. Outside of that, I don't think Baylor's going to lose anyone that is a locked-in starter or anything like that.
Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com football analyst, recruiting coordinator, Bearcast co-host with us today on 365 Sports.
So you've had an opportunity to see some of the newcomers during practice sessions. Anybody you're looking forward to seeing in more of a thorough game type of or scrimmage type of setting versus, a lot of the drill work and whatnot that we typically see?
I would say there's quite a few. I think the first one that I start with is Ketron Jackson, the Arkansas transfer. Obviously a big newcomer addition, the wide receiver that this staff really targeted and wanted immediately when he entered the transfer portal. They were able to get him. And since he's been on campus, he's been nothing but great. He's done everything the coaching staff has asked of him. He's been a big-time playmaker in the two scrimmages that they've had. And just been really consistent. And they really did not have that last year, kind of a true alpha on the outside. And I think Ketron Jackson could bring that to the table. So I'll definitely be focusing on him. I think the two offensive linemen, Clark Barrington and Campbell Barrington, Clark playing center, Campbell playing left tackle. Very curious to see how they do tomorrow, because the defensive line has kind of gotten the better of the offensive line for the most part through the spring. That started to change a little bit last week as the offensive line really got things going on the ground game. So I'm very curious to see who wins that battle. But I think for the offensive line, it really starts up front with those two, veteran guys who have been in college for a long time. So very curious about those two as well. Those are just three, but there's a lot of guys that I'm looking forward to seeing. Bryson Washington, the true freshman running back out of Franklin, really good players, had a great spring as well. North Texas tight end transfer Jake Roberts is another one that I'm definitely going to have my eye on.
Grayson, last thing, we discussed this a little bit yesterday with transfers now starting to come in, or whoever does, if anyone leave. Is there a position on this team that would not want to look at a transfer? Obviously, there's an elite player that might enter that could make you better, even if you have a pretty good situation. Is there any position that you think would say, nah, we're okay?
I mean, I think at this point, I would be pretty surprised if quarterback took another transfer, because they already took one, earlier in the spring. So I'd be surprised if they added someone to the fold there, being that they got Blake Shapen, Thor Robertson, and RJ Martinez. So I guess that's a position. That's probably the main one. I think I'd be hard. You'd really have to convince me for them to have to take another linebacker as well, being that they have Mike Smith and they have Matt Jones along with Josh White and Carmelo Jones at that interior linebacker spot, the Mike and Will position. So I would be surprised if they took a player at either of those spots. There's a couple others, honestly. Baylor's pretty set with their roster for the most part. There's just a couple positions in the secondary up front on defense that maybe raise some flags as to, hey, maybe they should go try to find some guys if they have some open spots.
Grayson, enjoy tomorrow. We will too. Baylor football spring game tomorrow at McLean Stadium around noon. Yeah, it will be, of course, there to have fun covering it a little bit and enjoy the sunshine on 365 Sports. We'll have Grant Miller.